After trying to beat all the Dark Souls 1 and 2 bosses in alphabetical order, there was one reoccurring question we saw in the comments on both of those videos. How are you gonna beat all the Dark Souls 3 bosses in alphabetical order? Isn't that game much more linear compared to Dark Souls 1 and 2? Yes, it is, and for a long time we didn't know how we were going to do it. But there's something I've learned by now. It's that you shouldn't underestimate the Souls community. So, can we beat all the Dark Souls 3 bosses in alphabetical order? Let's find out. Here are the rules. But first, if you like challenge run videos, mostly for classic PlayStation games, then you're on the right channel. We're called NG+, and this is pretty much all we do here. If that's your thing, please subscribe, thank you. Back to the rules. Rule number 1, we must kill as many bosses as possible in alphabetical order. We'll be going by the names that appear on screen during the boss fights. Rule number 2, we will be playing on a fresh new file and not New Game Plus. Rule number 3, glitches are fine, just no hacking. And finally, rule number 4, once we defeat the final boss that comes alphabetically, we win. Just to clarify, we are including both DLCs in this challenge. We're playing in English, and we're playing on the PlayStation 4 version of the game. Also, a boss is considered any enemy that has a giant health bar at the bottom of the screen. There are a total of 29 individual boss enemies in the game. So let's get started. We pick a cleric as we want to start with some faith. And they also start with a talisman, which we will also need for this run. The most helpful burial gift would be the Divine Blessing. The first boss alphabetically is Abyss Watchers. We light the first bonfire in the Cemetery of Ash, but then we run into our first hurdle very early on. The path to Firelink Shrine is blocked by Yhorm Gundyr. Until we defeat him, there's no way to progress the game, so we need to skip him. The issue with that is that when we started this challenge, there was no known skip for Gundyr on current patch. That didn't stop the community from trying though. There is a glitch that still exists on current patch, and it's called zipping. The short explanation is that if you do something that causes your character to continuously change their stance rapidly, the game freaks out. An easy example of this is if you rapidly equip and unequip a weapon that changes your character's stance, like a spear. You need to be walking at the same time though whilst doing this, and after about 13 to 17 seconds, we are zipped far into the distance, followed immediately by the game crashing. This glitch basically causes your character to zip to coordinates 000, which just so happens to be in the opposite direction of where we want to go. Since the game crashes every time we try this, it doesn't seem to be very helpful anyway. If you're wondering how we're able to spam the buttons so quick on PlayStation, we used a turbo controller. Is that against the rules? I don't know. They're my own rules, I suppose, but requiring specific hardware does sound a bit iffy still. There is another method of skipping Gundyr on current patch, which is even more controversial. If you have the game installed on an external hard drive and then unplug the hard drive at the right time, you can deload some parts of the game, like the boss itself or even the door behind the boss. Once we're beyond the door, you could then save the game to a local drive, quit out, close the game, plug the external drive back in, run the game and reload your save. This might work, but if a turbo controller was controversial, then this definitely is. There is one final known skip for Gundyr, but it only works on the original version of the game. I just so happen to own Dark Souls 3 physically on the PS4. If you want to run the original version of the game, delete the game from your console, disconnect the console from the internet, and insert the game disc. The game can't update now, and we can play version 1.0. This is where we noticed a dip in the frame rate since they increased the frame rate in a patch. Don't worry though, we won't be playing the unpatched version for long. We're only using it to show off this one skip. When Gundyr's health is about halfway down, he transforms into this. Now he will add a new grab attack to his arsenal. It's fairly strong, but as long as we have high health, we can survive it. If we can bait this grab attack near the exit door, it's possible to get clipped right through and onto the other side. We just need to make sure we don't die before reaching the bonfire in Firelink Shrine, or we'll respawn at the previous bonfire instead. We were even able to grab our dropped souls through the closed door. It's worth noting that the coiled sword that you pull from Gundyr isn't actually required to light the bonfire in Firelink. Since you're not meant to be able to reach Firelink without it, the game lets you use it regardless. This means that any method of skipping Gundyr could work theoretically, even if you don't grab the sword. From here, we can fully update the game to the latest version again, as the rest of the challenge will take place on current patch. It's quite surreal being able to see Gundyr still alive from Firelink Shrine though. Anyway, we use this tree to jump onto the roof, and from here we go to the back of Firelink to find the ring that increases our soul gain. We warp to the high wall of Lothric, we take the right path to find a bow near a transforming hollow, we grab the undead hunter charms among these barrels, and we grab the Lucerne polearm near the end of High Wall. We also need to receive the small Lothric banner from Emma before moving on. Our next step is to skip another boss called Vordt of the Boreal Valley, and we can achieve this with a glitch returning from Dark Souls 1, Death Cam. We explained this in our Dark Souls 1 video, but basically if we fall over an edge and to our death, the camera quickly goes overhead just before we die. If we can trick the game into thinking we're falling to our death, but we actually survive, the game locks the camera into this overhead cam view. The best way to get Death Cam in High Wall is to unequip our weapon, lure a hollow down these steps, back up against this wall, use a shield to parry the hollow's attack, and riposte while unarmed. The animation pushes us through the wall slightly, and this is just close enough to the edge behind the wall that the game thinks we've fallen over the edge and the death cam is activated. The bad part about this glitch is that we're now forced to use tank controls to move around. But the good part is, faraway areas stay unloaded, even if we approach them. As you can see, visibility is poor, but if we know the path ahead of time, we can navigate our way towards Vordt's boss room. It's a bit awkward searching for the steps when the ground is invisible, but we make it eventually. Once we enter Vordt's arena, we want to stick to one side of it as we make our way through. This is to ensure that we don't hit the load trigger for Vordt's intro cutscene. The door behind Vordt is deloaded, so we can walk right through and use the banner to trigger the cutscene, which we get to watch with the floor deloaded still. We get carried to the undead settlement, we travel through as normal and grab the Mortician's ashes in the area where the giant spears rain down. We hand those ashes over to the handmaid in Firelink, and that allows us to purchase the grave key from her. We use the grave key to open the door in the undead settlement sewers, which ultimately leads us to the NPC Irina. Talking to her sends her to Firelink. We'll need her help soon. We now need to approach this demon to prompt Sigurd to come down and fight it with us. Except we need to let Sigurd die so we can grab his armor set. I'm sorry, please don't click off. We head down to the Road of Sacrifices, fall down under this bridge and grab both items down here. They are the Morn Ring and the Braille Divine Tome of Karim. Then we travel back to Firelink to hand the tome to Irina. This allows us to buy the Tears of Denial miracle from her for 10,000 souls. We need to grab a couple more items, but we need to get to the Cathedral of the Deep first. This means we need to skip the Crystal Sage boss, and here's how we do it. As soon as we enter the boss arena, we sprint over to the exit fog. It's possible to jump off the debris on the left of the fog, and if we aim right, we can land on the raised ledge on the right side. A lot of the Sage's magic attacks will miss us here, but some of them can still hit us, so it's not completely safe. For now, we need to perform a fairly precise jump against the sloped wall. It really is more precise than it looks, not only the positioning but the timing too. If we land too far, we get stuck in a wall, but with the perfect landing, we can perch on the ledge higher up. From here, we roll to the left, and on the other side of the fog, the Crystal Sage is skipped. This gives us access to the first DLC area, Ashes of Ariandel, which we will be paying a quick visit to. We just need to sprint through the first areas until we reach this bird town. And here, we need to grab the Crow Talons and the Crow Quills. That's all we need from the DLC for now, so we travel back to the cathedral. We need to progress through the cathedral until we get to the rafters at the top. On the way, there is a hollow we can defeat to earn the Deep Ring. From here, we can drop down and kill this thing for a RedSign soapstone. Now that we have completed our shopping list, we would like a decent weapon for the run, and we can even show off 2 important glitches that we need to learn, not only to reach that weapon but for the rest of the run too. The first glitch is called Weapon Art Swapping, and mastering that glitch will allow us to pull off a second glitch, which is called the Teardrop glitch. We will be performing these glitches in the High Wall of Lothric. First things first, we attune the Tears of Denial miracle and use a talisman to cast Tears of Denial anytime before performing the glitches. We'll know that it's been cast if we can see a teardrop shaped light in our chest. This miracle will prevent us from dying the next time we take fatal damage, and instead it will put our HP on 1, almost like giving us a second chance. This is where we need to learn the first glitch, weapon art swapping. Simply put, it's a method of using the weapon art of one weapon but whilst holding a different weapon. This results in a different animation when the weapon art is executed. We want to use the Lucerne polearms weapon art but whilst holding the crow quills. For those who don't know, the crow quills weapon art has a jumping animation. Using the wrong weapon art with the crow quills equipped will result in a backwards high jump, and that's exactly what we need. Here's how to perform weapon art swapping. First, we equip a bow in our left hand, and we equip the Lucerne in our right hand. We press triangle to two-hand the Lucerne, and then we press L2 to perform its weapon art. From here, it's important that we don't use the left analog stick to move from this spot. Instead, we open the equipment menu and swap the Lucerne for the crow quills. We now need to perform an animation that locks our character into a movement, but without using the left stick. The best example is a backstep, as that's just a circle input. During the animation of the backstep, we hold both L2 and up on the left stick. This will cause our character to start walking forwards after the backstep. As soon as we see that walk animation, we let go of the left stick. We will still keep walking forwards, but if we kept the left stick held, it would make us walk too fast. Pressing R2 during this auto walk animation will confuse the game a little, and it results in us using the weapon art of the Lucerne but while the crow quills are equipped. This is what causes the backwards high jump, which is only possible when swapping to the crow quills, and that explains why we needed them. Would you believe we actually want to use this backwards high jump to hit a death plane here in the high wall? But first, let's move on to the next part of our setup. We need to summon a friend as an invader. This is easy if you're both using the same network password. This is also why we went out of our way to get the RedSign soapstone. Our invader friend will need to have completed a shopping list of their own. They will need a bow, a shield, a talisman, and a couple of spells. Those spells are Sacred Flame and any miracle, but the Lightning Arrow miracle is the most preferable. If you're wondering where to find these spells or why the invader needs these spells, don't worry, we will be needing them for ourselves eventually, so I'll explain it then. Once our invader friend has been summoned, we need to make our way to this section shortly before the dragon. With a well-timed jump, both the invader and us need to land on top of this wall. We both make our way around the wall, taking care not to fall off, and we now need to jump down to the raised circular platform below. We make sure the invader jumps first, as they need to fall down to the slightly lower wall on the right side of the circular platform. We follow them down, but we only just survive. If we haven't already cast Tears of Denial, now is the last chance to do so. Now, both our invader and I need to perform the weapon art swap glitch. The setups we use for the glitch are very similar, but still slightly different. As I say, I won't be going into detail on what the invader needs to do yet, since we'll be doing that ourselves eventually anyway. As the host, here's what we need to do. Stand as far back as possible without falling off. Face towards the bottomless pit and equip the heaviest armor we have. This is why we wanted Siegward's armor, as our goal is to be over 100% equip load. This is where we will be performing the weapon art glitch I mentioned earlier. The Lucerne spin sweep weapon art will put us on the very edge of the platform, and then we use the equipment menu to swap the Lucerne with the crow quills as normal. Now, instead of one backstep, we will be performing 3 backsteps instead. Being over 100% equip load will heavily reduce our movement, so we shouldn't fall off. It's during the 3rd backstep that we complete the weapon art swap glitch by holding L2 and up on the left stick. Again, as soon as we start to walk forward, let go of the left stick, and then right as we approach the very edge, we quickly turn left and press R2 immediately afterwards. This means that we high jump towards the right side, and if the positioning was just right, we just touch the death plane at the top of the jump. Having Tears of Denial cast means that our health becomes 1 instead of 0, but despite this, touching a death plane still starts the death animation. However, our invader friend was ready with a swap glitch of their own. Basically, they cast a miracle, and then do a weapon swap from a talisman to a shield. They then swap their spell to Sacred Flame, and then hit us with Sacred Flame right as we're dying. The unique thing about Sacred Flame is that it results in a grab animation, and the grab animation takes priority over our death animation for some reason. Usually the Sacred Flame spell would have taken our last health point away, and killed us, but because the Invader used a weapon swap glitch from a talisman to a shield, the game takes the shield spell damage into account when applying Sacred Flame damage. The shield does not have any scaling with magic damage by default, so the resulting damage is 0. This leaves us on 1 HP still, and with the death animation interrupted, we're still alive. Our body still faded away though, but another side effect of this glitch is gravity is completely broken. This is the Teardrop glitch. The gravity only breaks like this if it was a death plane that killed us originally, which is why we can't use any other method of dying. At this point, our Invader friend can leave our world, the rest is up to us. We are locked to whatever Y coordinate we were when we performed the glitch, so we can't just walk through the air to wherever we want. There's also no time limit on this glitch either, unlike in Dark Souls 2. We can even increase our altitude by walking up ramps or stairs, but whatever we change our altitude to, that becomes our new locked Y coordinate. We can also decrease our height by walking into downward sloped terrain. This includes this dragon tail here, which is very helpful. This allows us to reach this ladder, which leads down to another ladder. We are now quite close to the entrance of the Dancer's boss room, which brings us to the reason we decided to use the Teardrop glitch here. We want to skip the Dancer and reach Lothric Castle early. To do that, we need a bit more height. The collision of the railings of the stairs below us actually extend very high upwards, but still in a ramp shape. We can use the invisible ramp collision to gain the height we need. We walk through the wall on the left of the Dancer's boss room and reach the platform above the room to skip the Dancer completely. The only reason we wanted to be here early for the time being was to find the Sunlight Straight Sword. I figured it would go well with our faith build. We didn't want to risk dying before we could reach the first bonfire here, since that would mean having to redo the glitches all over again. These Lothric knights weren't going to make it easy for us though, but all we had to do was aggro them one at a time and then walk over the top of this elevator shaft. They can't reach us at the height we're at, and they can be lured to their deaths fairly easily. Dying or fast travelling during the Teardrop glitch will deactivate it, but we can still create fast travel points since we can still rest at bonfires with the glitch. To reach the Sunlight Straight Sword, we have to fall over the edge of one of the buildings near the Dragon Slayer Fog Gate and land on a balcony. The sword is inside a mimic chest, and this is why we grabbed the Undead Hunter charms. Using one of them renders the mimic docile and we grab the sword. We need Twinkling Titanite to upgrade this sword, so any we find from now on will be used to get this sword to +4. There's 3 Twinkling Titanite in the Firelink shrine alone. We can buy a prism stone and a large leather shield from the Handmaiden, and trade them both to Pickle Pea for Twinkling Titanite each. There's also one dropped by the Crystal Lizard at the back of the Firelink roof, which I didn't even know about before this playthrough. It's finally time to fight our first boss. From the Road of Sacrifices, we make our way through the Farron Keep as normal, and the boss fight at the end of the Farron Keep is the first one alphabetically, Abyss Watchers. Defeating them opens up the entrance to the catacombs, but there's something else we need to do. If we're going to reach the second boss that comes alphabetically, Aldrich Devourer of Gods, then we need to make a lot more preparations. We need to create a second character, and that character also needs to reach the Farron Keep. That character will also need 10 attunement, 12 faith, any shield, any talisman, and any bow. This character will also need to rescue Irina in the same way we did on the main character. Our alt character needs to buy and attune any miracle from Irina, if we don't already have one. We chose the heal miracle. Our alt character will also need to grab the RedSign soapstone from the Cathedral of the Deep. But since this character isn't restricted by the weird boss order, we can play our way there casually. Our alt also needs to access the catacombs, which means defeating the Abyss Watchers again. We make our way all the way down through the catacombs until we reach the Smouldering Lake. There's only one boss here, but fortunately it's not blocking us from what we're looking for. We need the Sacred Flame spell. It's in a pit of lava, but with our best fire protection and an ember, we had just enough health to grab it before we died. We then attune Sacred Flame. We fast travel our alt character back to Farron Keep and get them to the old Wolf of Farron bonfire at the top of the big ladder. We quit out and load back into our main character, who we also fast travel to the same bonfire in the Farron Keep. we need to perform the Teardrop glitch again. So, as we did before, we summon our Invader friend, and we both get into position. The Invader goes down the ladder and makes their way to the area close to the bonfire that's under a small roof, while we need to carefully jump and land on the railing next to these steps. We make our way along the railing until we reach this point. If we haven't done so already, now is the time to cast Tears of Denial. We then equip the Crow Talons and two-hand them. This particular weapon isn't required, we just need any weapon that allows us to perform a weapon art, but since the animation for the Crow Talons weapon art is quite long, that makes this weapon very ideal for what we're about to do. From here, we confirm that our Invader friend is ready with the same weapon swap glitch they used before. Once they are, we run along the railing and then jump 90 degrees to the right as soon as we get to the end of the railing. We just land on the edge of the railing before we fall, and as long as we're still holding the left stick to the right, we will perform a roll upon landing. During this roll, we spam the L2 button to perform the weapon art in mid-air. This wouldn't normally be possible, but the roll after the jump allows us to cue the weapon art, even if we're falling. We land right next to our Invader friend, and we hit both a death plane and a death cam trigger on the way down. However, the weapon art animation delays the death animation by a few seconds. This provides our Invader friend just enough time to hit us with Sacred Flame, and once again, we achieve the Teardrop glitch. There is a difference this time though, we still have the death cam activated. It's bad enough that this limits our visibility, but the worst result of death cam is the areas we want to travel to now are no longer loaded in. We saw this already with Vordt Skip, so this means that we can't leave the Farron Keep like this. In fact, we can't go anywhere else like this. Instead, we want to reach the small roof above the bonfire near where we landed. We can follow our Invader friend as they can lead us where to go. We first travel towards the Abyss Watcher's boss room as that will give us more height. Once we have enough height, we backtrack to that roof. We want to quit out once we're on top of that roof, but unfortunately the roof is invisible to us in this view, but our Invader friend can stand directly underneath the roof to help us know exactly where it is. We quit out and reload the save. This will undo the death cam glitch, and as long as we're on top of the roof, then mission successful. Now we need to help our friend reach this same roof. This means that they need to summon us into their world as an invader, but since we want to stay on that roof, we can't help them with this character. That's why we went through the trouble of creating a second character. We load our alt character, put down our RedSign, and it's our turn to play the invader now. Once we're summoned into our friend's world, we make our way to the same position that they did. We need to break these wooden things to get them out of the way, and then stand right against this tree facing this way. We will now do the weapon art swap glitch that our Invader friend did to help us get Teardrop. We equip a bow in our left hand and a talisman in our right hand. We two-hand the talisman and cast our miracle. In our case, that miracle is heal. Then, without moving, we open the equip menu, swap the talisman with a shield, and then press up on the D-pad to swap our spell to Sacred Flame. Our friend will now perform the rail jump in the exact same way that we did on our main character. If the positioning is perfect, our friend should land right in front of us. As soon as we see them land, we backstep and then hold L2 and up on the left stick, and then we press R2 to use the Sacred Flame with the shield in hand. We connect with our friend, and now they have the Teardrop glitch just like we did. If they turn invisible on our screen during this, they can recast Tears of Denial to ensure that we can see where they are. We guide them the same way that they guided us to get more height, and then we guide them back so they can quit out on top of the same roof that we did with our main character. That was our alt character's only job. So we load back into our main character. Now that we're both on top of this roof, we need to get the Teardrop glitch again. This is why both our friend and us need to be on this roof, so we can interact with our friend's Invader sign while we're up here. We actually had issues getting our signs to show up on this roof, but we found that by using a cracked eye red orb to invade someone random, then dying in that random player's world, we reload back onto the roof in our world, and our server connection just kinda restored itself. Now we can finally see his Invader sign. Summoning an invader like this actually spawns them in a separate pre-designated spot on the current map. So they won't spawn on this roof with us, but that's a good thing because we want them to be at the bottom and ready to hit us with another weapon art swap Sacred Flame. We face towards this part of the roof and we recast Tears of Denial. We didn't have enough FP to do this initially, but that's why we chose the Divine Blessing as our burial gift. we need to do exactly as we did before. Two-hand the Crow Talon, running jump into a roll over the edge and use the weaponar on the way down. Jumping here means that we just touch the same death plane that we touched on the previous teardrop glitch, only this time we avoid the death cam trigger, as that's higher up. With that, our friend helps us to activate the teardrop glitch again, but this time without the death cam, which means we are free to travel wherever we need to. The reason we needed the teardrop glitch here is so that we can skip all the bosses between us and Aldrich in Anor Londo. Firstly, we use the environment near the Abyss Watcher's room to get a bit of height, but not too much. Then we backtrack a bit and circle to the left. We know we have the correct amount of altitude if we're just above this hallway. We keep circling around until we're able to get outside the right side of the Abyss Watcher's room. If the altitude is right, then the catacombs should load in. As we get parallel with the first part of the catacombs, we turn 90 degrees to the right and head in that direction. There should be a message down below in the void. Head towards that until a beam of light shows up. Now head towards the top part of that beam of light. We should be only just above it, and then sprint straight forwards for a few seconds. Eventually the ending section of the catacombs should load in below us, and the start of Irithyll should load in front of us. We panned the camera down to prevent the game from crashing as it starts to load everything in all at once. We can even see the roof of Wolnir's boss room from here. We head left as that's where we can clip into Irithyll. We then use this leaning tree to push ourselves down a bit, which puts us just low enough to fit under the archway. We use the archway to lower ourselves down even more, and now we can reach the nearby bonfire. We have skipped Wolnir. It's worth noting that we can still rest at this bonfire during the teardrop glitch. It won't end the glitch. Just don't fast travel or quit out or die, as that will end the glitch. We need to continue to use this teardrop glitch to skip the bridge that leads into Irithyll. Otherwise, we would need a certain item to remove the hidden barrier, and that item can only be obtained by defeating a boss called the Deacons of the Deep. As we fly our way over there, we use the environment once again to raise our altitude where we can. We follow the main path, making sure to avoid all enemies. We use the stairs on our left to get a bit higher, and then we can just run over the enemies' heads. This helps us reach the next bonfire. From here, we want to skip another boss, Pontiff Sullivan. We head back outside and we can use the structures all around to raise our height. We can even use things like the stair railings or the statues. With that, we circle all the way around Pontiff's room on the right side. There are some death planes close to the room, so we keep our distance as we circle round. From here, we want to get as much height as we can, but there are a lot of dangerous enemies with ranged attacks. Unfortunately, we didn't quite make it, and we died before we could make it to Anor Londo. There aren't any bonfires after Pontiff's boss room and before Anor Londo, so dying here spawns us back to the start of Irithyll, and without the teardrop glitch. So if we want to skip Pontiff again, we would have to perform that series of glitches all over again back in Farron Keep. Or we can find somewhere closer to perform the teardrop glitch. Thankfully, there is somewhere closer we can do this. We need to travel through Irithyll dungeons to get there. We also need a few more items on the way, but it's not too out of the way. As we travel through the dungeon, we want to grab the Dusk Crown ring from one of the jail cells. There's also a simple gem here in the dungeon, and we want that too. When we reach the Profaned capital, there is another spell that we want to grab called Wrath of Gods. Once we have all the items we need, we head over to the first bonfire in Profaned capital. Since we're performing the teardrop glitch again, we need to summon our Invader friend once again. There is a very specific spot that we need to perform the glitch, and it's on the very thin ledge that we can only just land on if we fall down here. If we're too far to the right as we fall, we bounce off and die. If we're too far to the left, we clip the ledge and die. It is possible to stick the landing. The reason it has to be here is that there is a death plane right behind us towards the underside of the bridge. If we so much as take one too many steps in the wrong direction, we die immediately. This is the death plane we're going to abuse. The Invader falls down first and we follow right after. The Invader prepares the usual weapon art swap glitch. All we have to do is walk into the death plane when the invader is ready. They hit us with Sacred Flame just before we die, and we have the teardrop glitch once more. We walk away from the death plane to be safe, and now we need to make our way all the way back to Irithyll. We circle round the building right next to us until we see an opening in the left wall. We climb the stairs and follow the path to find more stairs that lead back to Irithyll dungeon. We walk out the opening by the giant and use the jagged rocks on the wall to lower our altitude. We want to go through the door below, but there's many rats down here. It's safer to take them out with a distance with firebombs. We can just squeeze under the roof and stand on the shortcut elevator to get back to the beginning of the dungeon. From here we backtrack to the lake, take the sewer tunnel, and climb the stairs at the back of Irithyll properly again. It's a bit dangerous with all the dogs and magic projectiles coming our way, but we can take the same path as before and skip Pontiff again. This time we are a lot more careful with how we approach these archers that killed us last time we were here. We take better advantage of the fact that we can float in the air, and we use the various spires to take cover now and then. Despite that, we still look like an invisible pincushion by the end. We make it over to this ledge that has a lever on it, and we want to pull that lever, but we're too high up. The archway above us helped to lower us down a bit, but it's not quite enough. The underside of one of the nearby ramps can lower us just enough to reach that lever. This lowers a spiral stair tower, and from there we can easily reach the Anor Londo bonfire. We don't necessarily need the teardrop glitch anymore, since Aldrich isn't far from here, but there's something else we can use it for. We head halfway up the big staircase, then walk over the edge to the left and head inside. In here we can see a thinner set of steps. We walk up them just a little bit and then walk back outside. We make sure that we have only just enough height so that we can still squeeze under the doorframe. This is the perfect height to walk around Aldrich's boss room, clip inside from underneath, and see that part of Aldrich's body is actually stretched down underground. I think you can see where this is going. We hack away at the weird slug tail thing until Aldrich is dead. Aldrich won't even try to fight back as his AI never activates. That's the second boss defeated. The third boss is Ancient Wyvern in the Archdragon Peak, and the only way there is to get the Path of Dragon emote. Casually, you would need to defeat Oceiros the Consumed King to get this emote, so we'll have to find another way. First, we travel back to the Cemetery of Ash, which is the very first bonfire in the game. The back of Oceiros' boss room actually leads out into the Cemetery of Ash. It's just that the opening is far too high up to reach from down here. Or is it? If we stand right where we first gain control of our character on a new game, we can see an empty coffin leaning against the wall. We're going to use the weapon art swap glitch with the crow quills again, and the height we get off the jump at the end can be used to just reach the top of this coffin. The landing is quite precise and it took a fair few attempts. To make this next jump easier, equip a parrying shield first. If you parry and then hold both forward and circle, we will suddenly sprint at full speed from the spot. This helps us build the speed we need in such a tight space. And we can land here. We then jump over to the left side with the same parry trick, and we can walk up to a higher part of the terrain. If it wasn't obvious, we were never meant to be up here, so everything doesn't look quite like it should. You can follow the path that we used here, and after a few jumps we come to this very high wall. It is possible to jump on top of this wall, but only if we angle the jump very precisely on the left edge of it, but not too far left because you can fall back down and have to start all over again. From here we can make our way along the cliff edge and fall down to the platform below. We are now standing in the cave exit just after the Oceiros boss fight, which means that we can grab anything that we can find down here far earlier than intended. And of course this includes the Way of the Dragon emote. Before we leave, we need to do something important. We walk over to the locked door at the back of Oceiros' boss room and quit out. Then we reload the game, travel back towards the way we came in from the Cemetery of Ash. However, we can now see that this area has become the Untended Graves. Normally this is what is supposed to happen upon defeating Oceiros, but quitting out near the back of his boss room achieves the same result. Now we can light the first bonfire in the Untended Graves, and not only can we use this bonfire to get out of here, but we can use it to return here when we need to. We fast travel back to Irithyll dungeon and we use the Path of the Dragon emote on this spot to get transported to the Archdragon Peak. The Ancient Wyvern boss is the first boss that you find here casually, so we can just progress as normal until we find it. And of course we use the one-shot method with the plunge attack. Now from here we return to the Ashes of Ariandel DLC and we play through it normally to reach the end. Whilst we're doing that, I will explain my reasoning for the next boss fight. The final boss of the first DLC is called Sister Friede, but she also has 3 phases, each with a different name. The names of these phases in order begin with S, F and B. Of course you can't fight her in her 3rd phase before beating the first 2. We decided that it should be the name of the final phase that we go by, as that's the name the boss has when it finally dies. This means our 4th boss is BlackFlame Friede, and to be fighting this boss as early as we are, we're gonna need a few more levels first. After all, I even had to resort to pushing this NPC Phantom off a cliff with my shield. We're going to duplicate a boss soul, and here's how. First, put the boss soul in our quick select and put the Estus flask in our tool belt. Also, we need a bow in our left hand. We want an area where we can fall off an edge with a small drop. So Firelink is perfect for this. We use the boss soul to bring up a yes/no prompt on screen. We need to sprint over the edge with this prompt up, but we need to highlight yes as we're doing this. If we press the circle button whilst the prompt is on screen, the game highlights the no option. So as we're sprinting, we need to press left on the D-pad to switch our option to yes. Next we sprint over the edge and rotate 180 degrees right as we fall. In midair, quickly press X to confirm the yes prompt. We then need to roll forward immediately as we hit the ground, and mid-roll we hold both L2 and up on the left stick. This results in the odd bow walking animation that we saw from the weapon art swap glitch. During that animation, we quickly press options and use the Estus flask from our tool belt. If we did it right, we will use the boss soul for 20,000 souls, but we won't have consumed the boss soul itself. We can repeat this ad nauseum, but do know that if we mess up our timing after hitting the yes prompt, we will consume the boss soul, and we won't be able to duplicate that boss soul anymore. Once we're leveled up and prepared, we can get to the end of Ariandel and challenge Sister Friede. I should also say that this run is the first time I have ever played the DLC for this game, so I was going into this boss blind. Her first phase wasn't too bad once I got the hang of tracking where she goes when she goes invisible. The second phase is against both her and Father Ariandel at the same time, and they even share a health bar, so it doesn't matter which one we hit. This phase was a decent challenge. Then her 3rd phase, BlackFlame Friede, is where I really struggled. It legitimately took me hours of attempts, but finally I was able to take her down with an NPC summon's help. I have no shame. But with that, we can go on a bit of a boss rush now. The next 5 bosses are all easily accessible for us at this point. We fast travel to the Untended Graves to fight the 5th boss, Champion Gundyr. Once he's beaten, we move on to the 6th boss, Champion's Grave Tender, which is an optional boss back in the game's first DLC. Accessing this boss is no problem, but this is the only boss in the game that is joined by another boss that we can't kill yet. That other boss is Grave Tender Great Wolf, so we need to make sure that we only kill Champion's Grave Tender, and then we use a Homeward Bone before the Grave Tender Great Wolf can get us. We return to Vordt Skip to put down the very annoying Crystal Sage. That is the 7th boss defeated. We fast travel back to the Undead Settlement to fight our 8th boss, the Curse Rot Greatwood, which was a complete joke to us by now. Then we fast travel back to the High Wall of Lothric to fight the 9th boss, the Dancer of the Boreal Valley. Except since we haven't killed certain later bosses, we can't get the Dancer to spawn yet. Unless we kill the innocent lady first. I felt kinda bad, but I felt better as soon as we defeated the Dancer. That brings an end to our boss rush, as the 10th boss alphabetically is Darkeater Midir, which is located in the middle of the game's second DLC, the Ringed City. There are 2 methods of accessing the second DLC, either from the Kiln of the First Flame, which is right at the very end of the game, or we can warp there from BlackFlame Friede's boss room. It's very fortunate that we can reach the Ringed City like this, and it's also lucky that none of the bosses in this DLC come before BlackFlame Friede alphabetically too. We played through the DLC casually until we reached the part where we must fall into a giant pit and into a boss fight that we don't want yet. The first mandatory boss of the DLC is down here, and it is called Demon from Below, so we need to skip that boss if we want to reach Darkeater Midir first. we need to make some preparations ahead of time. We have another shopping list to complete, and it's all for the benefit of enhancing our spells. We grab the Crown of Dusk back in the Keep swamp area. We grab both the Ring of the Sun's Firstborn and the Dusk Crown Ring, if we didn't get it already, from the Irithyll dungeons. If we didn't already get the simple gem here, this is the time to get it. All the rings we've been grabbing that boost miracle damage, we need to put them on now. With the Ring of the Sun's Firstborn and the Morn's Ring equipped, miracle damage is boosted by 32%. The Dusk Crown Ring reduces FP cost by 25%, and the Lloyd's Sword Ring boosts all damage we deal by roughly 10% as long as we have full HP. We will then use our simple gem to infuse any weapon that we have. We chose a dagger, and then we upgrade that dagger as much as we can. This is purely for the auto FP refill that all simple infused weapons come with, but upgrading the weapon after the infusion boosts the FP recharge rate slightly. We make sure to have both Tears of Denial and Wrath of God spells attuned too. We also allot all Estus to our Ashen Estus flask. It's time to skip the Demon from Below boss fight, and it starts here in a much earlier part of Dreg Heap. We want to summon our Invader friend once again, but there is something that our Invader will need first, and that is any piece of equipment that offers auto HP regeneration. There is a shield that does this, and I just so happen to have the same shield. It can be found within this tower in the first DLC. As long as the Invader has this, we're good to go. Back in the Dreg Heap, we need to jump on top of this mound right here and stand on the plank of wood sticking out. We need to stand just far enough that the Invader has room to jump up here too, but not too far since there is a death plane right in front of us at about head height. We cast Tears of Denial if we haven't already, and our Invader prepares the usual weapon art swap. And then we use a one-handed R1 attack with our simple dagger to touch the death plane in front of us. Touching it like this causes our character to stagger backwards. The Invader hits us with Sacred Flame as we're dying, and once again we achieve the Teardrop glitch. Staggering backwards prevents us from being pushed right back into the death plane after being hit with Sacred Flame. We now need to help our Invader achieve the Teardrop glitch as well. We use the nearby terrain to lower our height a little bit, and then stand about here. We equip a weapon that only deals a single hit during a backstab animation, like our simple dagger. The Invader will need to cast Tears of Denial on themselves and equip the HP regen shield. They will also want to boost their weight a lot. We lock onto the Invader and make sure to follow their movements. They turn their back to the death plane and tap circle to heavy backstep into it. They should die and fall over the edge. We quickly walk up to their back and perform a backstab before they despawn. This allows them to achieve the Teardrop glitch alongside us. The reason this works is whereas the death plane kills the Invader, it doesn't remove the Tears spell. However, the game still sets the Invader's HP to 1 immediately as they're despawning. This is why the Invader needs HP regen. As soon as they drop to 1 HP, the HP regen heals them for a tiny amount, and then we hit the backstab to interrupt the death animation. Since their Tears of Denial spell is still active, the backstab will only drop the Invader back down to 1 HP again. Now that we're both in the Teardrop glitch state, we both need to descend down to the Demon's boss arena. This is a long way down, but with clever use of the environment in Dreg Heap, we can descend down to the giant pit. And then we can use the outside walls of the pit itself to lower ourselves down even more. To help prevent not getting separated from the Invader, we can lock onto them as we follow. Plus, recasting Tears of Denial makes it so that we can see each other as well at all times. Eventually, it gets to the point where we need to find invisible parts of the terrain to help push ourselves down even further. To help find it, one of us can use prism stones and see if they stick to something. This entire process is quite time consuming. It's also important to make sure that you avoid any death planes. If you're playing on console then you can't see the death planes. When you get low enough you don't have to worry about death planes anymore anyway. We can't risk getting too low down though. If we go too much lower than this, then the demon boss will be triggered, and that will despawn the Invader. We learned this the hard way. We cannot afford to let that happen, or we'll have to start this skip all over again. So when we get to about this altitude, we circle the entire pit until we can see a rock tunnel below us. This is the exit tunnel that is used after the demon boss is defeated. We can use the left side of the wall here to slowly lower ourselves down to that ledge below. Once we're close enough to this ledge, being here actually loads in the ringed city, but we cannot travel there. Even if we go inside the tunnel to grab the small envoy banner from just outside the demon's boss room, it won't work unless the demon boss is defeated first. I find it strange that the game has a flag that means the demon has to be dead before the banner can be used. That would be the same as not being able to use the banner back in the High Wall of Lothric unless Vordt was dead. I mean, no, that's not the case. Regardless though, this means we cannot reach the ring city from here. However, if the ring city is loaded in just by standing here, this also means that Darkeater Midir's boss arena is also loaded in. And would you believe it's located high in the sky above this very mountain. It's also quite far in the distance too, and even though we can't see it, it is there. We didn't come to this ledge for nothing though. Like we said, we had to be here to load in Midir's boss arena. We just need to find a way back up again from here, but if we touch any part of the mountain, the ringed city will deload again. We need a method of gaining height from this spot, and without touching any part of the environment at all, which sounds impossible. However, this is exactly why we didn't want our invader to get despawned. They're allowed to touch the surrounding environment as much as they want. So here's the plan. The invader ventures off to find parts of the environment to gain a little bit of height. And when they return to us, as long as the height they gained is only a little bit higher than we are, the invader can still backstab us. The backstab animation raises us up to match the invader's height. This means that we can repeat this over and over to slowly inch our way upwards. Just make sure the invader is barehanded to reduce the damage as much as possible. We also make sure to keep the HP regen shield and the FP regen dagger equipped at all times. And then we can use the heal spell now and then when necessary. The invisible collision that we use to lower ourselves down here actually does stretch all the way down this far. So the invader can use that to gain height if they need to. We can even follow them there as long as we don't touch the mountain on the way. Make sure to give it a wide berth. It takes a long time, but eventually with enough backstabs, we are at this height. You can even see the line of prism stones that the invader used to make sure they knew where the invisible terrain was the entire time. This is the perfect amount of altitude, no more and no less. If you want an idea of how long this took, my recording of this entire skip is over 5 hours long. Now we need to travel in the direction of Midir's boss arena. With the help of map viewing tools on a PC, we were able to work out the direction to travel on the PS5, and it's a straight shot from here. It's a long way away though. If we've done everything right up to this point, and we have travelled to the right spot, at the right height, then this happens. Woo! Oh. The entire arena loads in all around us. Being this close to a boss arena causes our invader to get kicked out of our world. The rest is up to us. We need to defeat Midir and we only get one shot, otherwise we've got to repeat the entire skip all over again. But we also can't enter the arena properly since the walls are all solid all the way around. This is the perfect height to trigger the boss's AI if we get close enough to it though. This is also why we needed to boost our miracle damage as much as possible. The only way we can hit Midir is with the Wrath of God spell, as it does AoE damage that goes through walls. This means we need to get dangerously close though, but fortunately Midir's physical attacks can barely reach us. The same cannot be said for its fire breath attacks. If we see one coming, we need to get out of the way and fast. Like we said, we really can't afford to die here or we have to do the entire 5-hour skip all over again. It would really suck if Midir's flame breath killed us now. Midir's second phase does add to the difficulty as it gains more ranged attacks that goes through the wall, but rest assured, this can be done. After using Wrath of Gods through the wall enough times, Midir is defeated. The only way out of here now is just to warp back to the bonfire. Now we can go on another boss rush. The 11th boss is Deacons of the Deep, back in Cathedral of the Deep, which is easy. Then the 12th boss is Demon from Below, which is the boss that we spent all that time skipping in the Dreg Heap. We can enter its boss room casually now, but the important thing to note is that it's joined by the 13th boss, Demon in Pain. Since these two bosses follow each other alphabetically, we can kill them both now. We just need to make sure that we kill Demon from Below first. When they're both down, the last one transforms into the 14th boss, Demon Prince, which just so happens to be the next boss alphabetically. That was lucky. This is also my first time fighting these demon bosses, so I may have struggled a little bit. That is, of course, until another NPC offered their help. Again, no shame. It's very lucky that all three of these followed each other alphabetically, isn't it? Next up, we have the 15th boss, Dragon Slayer Armor. And we already have access to this boss since we've already been to Lothric Castle, so no issue there. The 16th boss is Grave Tender Great Wolf, which is also the last boss that we have left in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC. We've already beaten Champion's Grave Tender, so we just need to make sure we don't kill him this time. We still need to damage him a bit to get the Great Wolf to spawn though, but then we focus purely on the wolf until it's down. I will follow the feedback that we got from the Dark Souls 2 Alphabetical Order challenge and kill the Champion's Grave Tender afterwards too. The 17th boss is Half-Light, Spear of the Church. He's found at the end of the Ringed City beyond the Demon Prince boss, and we can only go there now that the Demon Prince is dead, so it's a good thing Half-Light comes after Demon Prince. This was our first time playing this part of the DLC as well, and first impressions were brutal. Thankfully, no other boss lies between the start of this area and Half-Light, but when we entered the Fog Gate, something was wrong. The boss began with the letter S. So it turns out, if you're playing online, this boss fight can be against an online player, and they have the name Spear of the Church. But if you're playing offline, then this boss is called Half-Light, Spear of the Church. So we go into this fight offline, just to ensure that the name is right. He was pretty challenging, especially when he keeps summoning more people, but eventually we sniped him with a fireball to finish him off. The 18th boss is High Lord Wolnir, and since we already skipped over this boss, we can just travel through the catacombs as normal and take him down. The 19th boss is even easier, as he is the very first boss in the game, Iudex Gundyr. It's finally time to beat the tutorial. You know we had to parry him to assert our dominance. Even though Gundyr is defeated, we're gonna leave this door closed, just because we can. The 20th boss is King of the Storm, which we already have access to in the Archdragon Peak. But we need to go over something. We said at the start of the video that there were 29 boss enemies in the game, but if we count King of the Storm as a separate boss, there's actually 30 bosses in total. When King of the Storm is defeated, it's immediately followed up by the Nameless King. There are two bosses that come between King of the Storm and Nameless King alphabetically. If King of the Storm was just the first phase of a two-phase boss fight, then we would just go by the same rule that we used for Sister Friede. That would mean forgetting about the letter K and just killing King of the Storm and Nameless King back to back when we reach the letter N. But these two bosses are separate enemies, so you could argue that I should kill King of the Storm now and then bone out to carry on with the alphabet. The issue with that is that we need to kill King of the Storm again just to get to Nameless King. The third option is to consider this challenge impossible and the run dies at the letter N. But I'll leave that decision up to you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. For the sake of this video, I'll move on to the next boss. The 21st and 22nd bosses are both fought together, Lorian and Lothric. But to reach these bosses, we need to have defeated Abyss Watchers, Aldrich, and Yhorm. Otherwise, the key to the archives won't spawn beyond Dragon Slayer. Abyss Watchers and Aldrich are dead, but we can't kill Yhorm yet. In fact, Yhorm is the last boss alphabetically. We'll just have to skip the archives door then. Remember that teardrop glitch we used in High Wall? We need to use it again. By the way, the reason that Lightning Arrow is the preferred miracle for the Invader's setup is that the user is able to walk around whilst readying it. This helps the Invader get into the exact position they need. We had to settle with the heal miracle because Lightning Arrow is only found at the end of Ring City. After we reach Lothric Castle with it, we need to continue on to where we we fought Dragon Slayer and walk around his boss room. We can use the steps before the archive door to gain a bit of height, and then we turn back. We circle around the left side of the building until we see this gap in the wall. Approaching this gap loads in the archives, and we can use the invisible sloped rocks for more height. From here we can use the rooftops for even more height until we can enter the archives from a balcony. Just be careful not to get jumped by the giant monsters up here. This puts us right next to the shortcut elevator that brings us back down to the archives entrance. This skips the need for the archive key entirely. It doesn't matter if we keep the teardrop glitch here or not, but we can travel to the next boss casually from here. We need to kill Lorian first, but since Lothric can revive Lorian, we need to kill Lothric directly afterwards before that can happen. Thank goodness these two follow each other alphabetically, because I don't want to have to think about how we would tackle this otherwise. Once they're beaten, we move on to the 23rd boss, Nameless King. As we said, even if we killed King of the Storm at the letter K, we'd be forced to kill it again here just to fight Nameless King. The real challenge here is actually killing this boss, but we got there in the end. The 24th boss is Oceiros, the Consumed King, located in the Consumed King's Garden. We have easy access to this area since we've already got access to Lothric Castle, and we make short work of Oceiros himself. The 25th boss is Old Demon King back in the Smouldering Lake. We took our alt character through this area, but not our main character. This isn't an issue though, since we can reach this boss by travelling through the catacombs as normal, and the boss itself is even easier than Oceiros. The 26th boss is one we've already skipped, Pontiff Skip. We can reach this boss room from Irithyll just fine, and of course we had to parry him to death, just to make ourselves feel powerful before having to move on to the 27th boss, Slave Knight Gale. This boss is fought in an area directly after Half-Light, so accessing it is easy for us, but winning the fight is not. Again, this was my first time fighting this boss since it's part of the DLC, and I have to say, it is very cool. He has multiple phases, but his name never changes, so we can just focus on the fight itself. Finally, with Gale beaten, that brings us to the 27th boss, Soul of Cinder, which is also the final boss of the game. Defeating Soul of Cinder doesn't force us into New Game Plus in this game, but that's not the issue. The problem is actually reaching Soul of Cinder in the first place. He's in the Kiln of the First Flame, and casually, the only way to reach the Kiln is to defeat 4 other bosses first. They are Abyss Watchers, Aldrich, Lothric, and Yhorm. Once those 4 are defeated, we can warp to the Kiln from Firelink Shrine. Once again, Yhorm rears his head as the only one of those 4 bosses we can't kill before Soul of Cinder. There was no known method of reaching Kiln earlier than intended when we started this challenge. So it turns out the Kiln is actually loaded in when you step inside Firelink Shrine, but whereas Midir's boss arena was loaded in quite high in the sky, the Kiln is loaded in miles above Firelink. Looks like we'll have to skip Soul of Cinder after all. Or do we? Remember when I said at the start of the video to not underestimate the Souls community? Well, when they decide to put their heads together, there's not much they can't do. This next skip is proof of exactly that. Full transparency, this skip was discovered whilst I was making this video, so I myself haven't done it. But I can show you the footage of those who have. You need to get 6 players into Firelink Shrine, 3 invading summons and 2 friendly summons and the host. Normally you can't summon this many players all at once, but if the host uses a dried finger, then that makes it possible to summon all 5 of these other players. Although I do need to clarify something. A host can only summon friendly players in an area if that area still has a boss unbeaten in it. In Firelink, the boss is Iudex Gundyr, but Dark Firelink works as well, as the game considers it to be the same location, just in a different state. The boss in Dark Firelink is Champion Gundyr. In our run, this boss has already been defeated. So if we were to incorporate this skip into the alphabetical order run, we would need to perform this skip before killing Champion Gundyr. The skip can be done directly after killing BlackFlame Friede. The setup for this skip is complicated though. All 5 summoned players need to be put into the Teardrop state after they get summoned into the host's Dark Firelink. There is a spot in Dark Firelink that can be used to put players into Teardrop, but unfortunately it triggers the death cam as well. Having all 5 players stuck in death cam would only hinder the rest of the skip, so a solution was found. The 2 players that would be the friendly summons both need to get Teardrop glitches in High Wall of Lothric, just like we already did twice before. From here, it's possible to travel all the way to Dark Firelink, and when these 2 players reach it, they need to place their white summon signs down on this cliff. The host will need to teardrop their way from High Wall to Dark Firelink as well, and summon all 3 Invader players. Then the Invaders can use this drop to get teardropped by the host one at a time. The host will then use their teardrop glitch to reach the same cliff that the 2 white signs are on top of, and they will summon the 2 friendly players. If the white phantoms fall off this cliff, they will hit a death plane but not the death cam trigger. So both the friendly summons can fall off this cliff, and any of the red phantoms can put them in the teardrop glitch. Now that we have all 6 players in Dark Firelink and all with the teardrop glitch, the host needs to walk inside Firelink Shrine itself to load in the kiln high above. The plan is now to create a human staircase, so to speak, and here's how. Assuming we start with all 6 players on solid ground all at the same height, we have the host gain a bit of height using the environment. Have one of the invaders do the same so they match the height of the host. Then have a friendly gain a bit of height but not as much as the previous 2. Another invader gains a bit of height but not as much as the previous friendly player. The other 2 players stay at ground level. Basically the idea is to create a staircase-like formation with the player heights like this. This will now be the routine for all 6 players from here. The host walks over Red 1's head to gain a bit of height, and then returns to their original position. Red 2 backstabs White 1 to raise White 1's height. White 2 does the same to Red 2, Red 3 does the same to White 2, and the host does the same to Red 3. White 1 will now backstab Red 1 to bring Red 1 up a little, and now since the host can use Red 1's head again to gain more height, the whole thing can start all over again. This can be repeated infinitely, which also means we can gain infinite height. All players should have auto HP regen of course, and remain unarmed to reduce damage. The community did the math early to find out how long this would take to reach the kiln like this. Based on how long each backstab cycle takes and how much height we gain versus the amount of height we need, it was estimated that it would take roughly 60 hours of continuously repeating this routine to reach the kiln. Despite how long it takes, the community proved it was possible to reach the kiln early doing this. As soon as the host reaches the lowest part of the kiln, all other players leave their world and the host lights the bonfire. If we had done this in our run, we would then warp back to the Untended graves to carry on with the alphabetical order and defeat Champion Gundyr. Then, once Slave Knight Gale was defeated, we would warp back to the kiln bonfire and defeat Soul of Cinder. We choose not to go into New Game Plus, and instead we fast travel to the High Wall and defeat Vordt of the Boreal Valley. Finally, we fast travel to the Profaned capital and defeat the 30th and final boss, Yhorm the Giant. We have done it! Can you beat all the Dark Souls 3 bosses in alphabetical order? Yes, you can! And it's the only Dark Souls game in the trilogy where this challenge has been 100% possible. You just need 5 friends to help you and about 60 hours of spare time. So don't expect this to become a speedrun category or anything. A huge thank you to everyone who made this possible, including all 6 players who worked together to reach the kiln early. But without this one person, this video would not exist. His name is Tor, and he planned pretty much the entire route for this run, and he taught me how to perform all the glitches you saw in this video. Thank you all for watching. If you like challenge run videos like this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're getting very close to 100k subs, so let's make it happen. Finally, a thank you to our biggest supporters. They are A Lazy Dragon, Bearcat18, Big Wolf Chris, Clara B, Clarky299, Digmo, Don John Playfair, Doylt, Dragonhearth19XX, Drifting Shade, D-Stud, Duigi, Efesty, Evolve Pixel, Finn Living with a Ghost, Fister Nightly, Floop, GB John, Griffy, Hakey Joey 14, Hamscoffer, Harpinger, Harpo Kotal, Hell Yeah, Henneman1, Human Virus 23, Jack Appleton, Jack Scott, Jamanta Juggernaut, Jesus Christ 00AD, Jimmy, Jimsy, Gino5 Johnny505, Joe Blows Slaboni, John Fitz49, Johnny Kaufman, Judy Tester, Cami7, Cola E Ero, Lucas, Melphilis, Miss Barbs, Mr. Chris Wesker, Nick CF, Owl Hatch, Phoebe Draper, Queen Cinder 621, Quizzacottle DB, Rocket Plod, Sarah Penguin, Sin, Sir Rando, Spectrum Z, Talminos, 10 divided by 6, That Chloe is Odd, The Great Michelle, The Joker, The Dark Sun, Tim Zero, Tom Geonet, Tor ZH, Tauster, True DK0, 13, username JP, Velvet Violetta, Vinny, Vital Daffodil, VV is Vicious, William Zingelman, Zachary Mortensen, 0, and our patrons, A Lazy Dragon, LED23, Stephen Foot, and Tor. Thank you, you beautiful people. If you want to see this same challenge run with Dark Souls 1 and 2, I will link that playlist on screen now. But if you're also into your turn-based JRPGs, why not check out our Final Fantasy challenge run playlist? I'll link that on screen as well. Let's see if I can get the next video under an hour next time, shall we?